would be great. All set? All right, so let me get back. So controlling the slides and the screens in and on. Are we all looking at the same thing at this moment?
Yes.
All right, success. So this basin plan is for the West, the Williams and the Saxtons rivers, and all the smaller streams that run directly to the Connecticut. So that's what we're going to be discussing tonight. So we do this all around the state. There are 15 basins and 5 planners, and we do this on a rotating basis every 5 years. The basin we're dealing with tonight is the lower southeastern corner of Vermont with this basin. And basically what a tactical basin plan does is it acts as the guidebook for the Agency of Natural Resources on how we protect and restore surface waters going forward. So what we do is we monitor, we begin the cycle with monitoring and take all that information to synthesize it and try to understand what that monitoring data on water quality is telling us. And then we look at that and try to lay out specific goals for our waters, strategies and actions to improve and protect them. And as we do that, what these basin plans do is guide the funding that the state has to work on clean water. So that's why we're doing this and what this plan is used for. So the whole basin is about 700 square miles, and 29 towns are in the basin. Some are all in the basin, some are partly in the basin. And we cover the 26 miles of the Connecticut River, basically, if you know where Herrick's Cove is in Rockingham, down to the Retreat Meadows in Brattleboro. That's the stretch, excuse me, of the Connecticut River that we're covering. So the West River, let me change my pointer, running from Weston and all the way down to Brattleboro. The Williams River, in Andover and down to Rockingham, and the Saxtons River is basically Windham to Rockingham and Westminster. So those are the 3 main watersheds we'll be covering. We do that first monitoring step early on, and this is a map of where things are good and where things are of concern. So anything in the green range is in good condition for macroinvertebrates, which is our bugs, the benthic macroinvertebrates that live in the bottom of the stream, and they're our best indicator of water quality. So we rely on looking at our bugs quite a bit. And as you go on down into the red range, there are water quality concerns or problems that we know exist, but 60% of our streams are rated as excellent and another 28 are rated as good to very good. So the waters in this basin are actually in really good condition. We also monitor our lakes, and these little discs, we look at the nutrient trend, we look at the shoreline and the lake habitat, we consider invasive species, and then we consider mercury pollution, which for lakes is pretty much of a concern. Again, so anything in the blue range is in good condition. Anything in the red range is concern. So again, our lakes are also in good condition. And if you have specific, questions about them, please stick that in the chat. We do have a number of acid impaired lakes. Basically, this is from acid rain over time, and we just happen to be sitting where the atmosphere comes from the Midwest power plants and dumps on southern Vermont. So we have our fair share of acid impaired lakes. And we also have some that are considered impaired for flow, but that's basically because they are dammed reservoirs and ponds. They don't have natural flows in them. So that's the condition of our lakes. When we look at the forest land is the most protective land use that we could hope for water quality. that tree layer, the duff layer, water infiltrates, it filters, and it comes down out of forest into our streams and rivers. So we have 89% of this basin is in some kind of forest cover, which is why, in a lot of ways, we have such good water quality in this basin, because we've got such great forest cover. We also have some concerns and I think responsibility for rare, threatened, and endangered species. This map just kind of adds up the number of species that are rare, threatened, or endangered in a little block. So we have a couple of concentrations, and what I am focused on in this plan is Rockingham, Herrick's Cove, and Retreat Meadows in Brattleboro both have significant populations of rare, threatened, and endangered species. And you can see that the West River itself is an important river for those species. So we're looking at that and keeping that in mind in our protection and restoration work. There's a federally endangered bulrush here. One of the mussels that is in the West River and the Connecticut River is the Burke floater mussel, and it is seriously in decline. And the cobblestone tiger beetle lives on those shores with cobblestones that get flooded every so often, but so very little grows on them. And that's a state threatened species as well. So these are all of concern and addressed in the basin plan. This is a crazy map to look at, but it also is indicative of what we've got going for us here. The green and the blue lines are rivers that already meet our highest water quality classifications of A1 and B1. The dotted ones, we think they meet those, but we just need a little more monitoring to confirm that. The red ones are the ones that meet B1 criteria for fishing. That comes from our Department of Fish and Wildlife, and they look at the number and species of fish in our rivers. We have something called outstanding resource waters, which is another way of doing protection that focuses more on specific features and characteristics. Like the one that we already have is Pikes Falls. And, you know, the geology of that, the resource for swimming, you know, there's something special about that short stretch. And that is the only outstanding resource water we have. But we do have some that we might consider putting forward for that designation. And then we also look for Class 1 wetlands, which ones meet those really high uses and values that set them apart from others. So all of these are potential reclassifications or ways to protect the waters. And the reason we want to do that kind of protection is to make sure that what's good stays good over time, that it doesn't get degraded as, you know, as development happens and as other things happen on the landscape. We would like these waters to remain as good as they are now.
Repeat say something about the triangles.
Oh, sorry, the triangles. Oh, sorry, it's hidden. Let me hide that. Sorry about that. Those are the wetlands that are considered, they need study to see whether or not they meet the Class 1 wetlands criteria. Thank you. And this is all of them. So you can glance through that and see if your favorite brook or the ones that you think need to be protected are on this list. And we are always looking for suggestions. Where are the waters that people feel need or should or deserve a higher level of protection, so that they remain in this excellent condition? And I would love to hear from you in the comments if you have other thoughts, or if you know of a water quality concern on one of these waters that we are not aware of. There are a number of dams in the watershed as well. There are 49 mapped dams. These are the ones we know about. The last 5 dams I've been involved in removing. Only one of them was a map dam. So there are lots and lots of dams out there that are not on our maps. Dams have a number of impacts to the river ecology. They block fish and other aquatic organisms, obviously, from moving up and down. They also block sediment transport, which is a water quality and a habitat issue. And they change the ecology from a river system, flowing water, to mostly a lake system in the reservoir or backwater of the dam. So they have different impacts. And so dam removal of those dams that are not serving any particular function is certainly a high priority for the basin plan. The dams that are listed on the right are the ones that are the higher hazard dams. And that term doesn't mean that the dam's in bad shape. It means that if the dam were to fail for some reason, there is the very strong likelihood of loss of life and property downstream of that dam. So the significant hazard dams tend to be the larger ones. Obviously, Townsend, Ball Mountain are in there, and the larger lake dams that's holding back a lot of water. If those were to fail, then downstream is certainly in jeopardy. So those are, again, they're not that they're necessarily going to be removed, but they do need to be inspected and watched and maintained.
Marie, there were 2 questions. Someone asked if there will be a link to this presentation for use for later.
I will figure out how to do that. It may take me a few days. I haven't had to do this before, so.
And then the second one was, can DEC help with outreach to private landowners to find more of those unmapped dams?
Yes, and we work with a number of partners on that. The Conservation District and the Connecticut River Conservancy do a lot of that. If you know of dams, I am all ears. There are new dam regulations that have just come in last summer and more that are coming next summer. So the more we can identify the dams and understand where they are, it will be helpful in moving those forward and making sure that the dams remain safe for the neighborhood. And, you know, we have great water quality, but there still are water quality concerns out there. And these are the ones that are not meeting the Vermont water quality standards or are kind of on the edge of going over that cliff. The 303D and the TMDLs, the yellow and the reds, are not meeting Vermont water quality standards now. And the stressed ones, orange, are on the edge. They're degraded, and we are either aware of what it is that's degrading them or still kind of trying to figure that out. Others are called altered waters. So all of these are in some way in need of restoration. So these are the ones listed in the basin plan for us to be working on. And I'll show you what those are. Basically, we consider this by the pollutant that is impairing the water. So again, we have that acid dumping that happens over this particular basin. So 20 of them are for acid. Flow modification is considered, and temperature are actually considered pollutants. And those flows, again, Ball Mountain Dam, Townsend Dam, 3 hydroelectric dams on the Connecticut River. And those are all flow modified or stressed because of those alterations in flow. And these again is that list of waters. And so these are always focused. We are required by EPA to address impaired waters, the ones that don't meet Vermont water quality standards. And we are working, like the acid lakes has what's called a TMDL, and some others have that. So we are working on them, and we have more of those coming up. We have what's called a TMDL, a total maximum daily load. in the entire Connecticut River watershed for nitrogen. And the reason for that is because the Connecticut dumps down into Long Island Sound, where this additional nutrient has caused massive dead zones in Long Island Sound. So modeling has been done to try to identify where the nitrogen is coming from in Vermont. And I found it interesting to look at these maps and see that quite a lot of those reds in the center map are basically private septic systems. So we'll be looking at how we can address that, how we can do outreach to landowners on that kind of maintenance and to smaller villages that don't have municipal wastewater systems and that kind of thing, to see if we can't address and minimize some of that loading from that septic system source. So we do have some restoration priorities that have come out of this plan. Crosby Brook, down in the bottom right corner, is impaired for sediment, and so that is on the list of to-dos. That's the brook that runs right through the roundabout in Brattleboro. There's a small brook there, and it comes from, it starts up in Dummerston, comes down into Brattleboro. The lower Saxtons River is stressed, so we'll be looking at that and how we can do outreach for agricultural issues and the lack of riparian buffers through there. And a similar situation on the Williams River, where there's a lot of agriculture, certainly some development, as well as a lack of buffers through a lot of that watershed. West River in South Londonderry does have an impairment for bacteria, so that's high on the list of looking at and trying to address, figure out where that bacteria is coming from and addressing that, seeing if we can't stop that from happening and clean that up. Stiles Brook is out by Stratton, and they have been working for a number of years to address its stormwater issues there. So continuing that work to try to get that brook off the impaired list. And then the Townsend Reservoir issue. Certainly it's a large community concern that the Townsend Reservoir is somewhat unusable due to sediment at this point. So we will be looking at that issue as well. This is just kind of a highlight. There's a lot more to-dos in the plan.
I have a question. Regarding slide 14, are these instances of septic system nitrogen loading based purely on models, or is there data to back up that modeling?
It's some of both. The models are based on data that is from EPA, it's from the state of Vermont, and it's from USGS, but it is more broad data. So it is modeling data. So we say, it may be contributing. And so we will be needing to look at that more and see if that is the contributing factor. But yes, it is modeling data. So we can't say absolute on any of this. As we put the basin plan together, we look at the strategies and the actions that need to be taken under these 5, what we call land use sectors. So we address agriculture and stormwater and roads, which are a large contributor of sediment, wastewater issues, and then the natural resource restoration issues that we propose to do. Agriculturally, there are a few areas of concern in this watershed. Kind of the upper West River has very few trees along it in some large stretches. So up in the northern end of the West River, buffers really need to be looked at and try to see if we can't get some more buffers in there. The Williams River there is a nitrogen and a nutrient and sediment concern in that river. So we'll be looking at that. Similar to the Saxtons River, both of those have the same concerns. The Connecticut River has the largest farms in the region along it, and those are right on the Connecticut River, which has the nitrogen loading problem. So we would like to look at that in more detail. Sackett's Brook we haven't determined exactly what's going on, but it has very high bacteria levels. So we're trying to focus in on that and figure out what's going on there. So that is something that we will be looking at. And there's a lot of agriculture along that as well. So that may play into the issues that are happening on Sackett's. Stormwater issues, certainly a lot of the developed lands tend to be, Brattleboro, Bellows Falls, Chester have more of those than others, and certainly Ball Mountain Brook, where the ski area is. So these are the focus areas for that. Again, Crosby Brook in Brattleboro. We have developed some what are called stormwater master plans, and there are more in process. And what that does is provide a list of stormwater fixes that can be put in, and the state has funding to assist municipalities in making those stormwater upgrades. So we'll be looking at those. And there are already reports for each town on their stormwater systems with some recommendations for projects in there. So we will be looking at all of those potential projects and trying to find partners to implement those. Our gravel roads do a lot of contributing of sediment and other pollutants to the waterways. So as many of you know, the road erosion general permit, or the municipal roads general permit, looks at road erosion, and towns have done road erosion inventories. The red and the orange are the high priority focus areas. The map has got some blanks in it because not all the data from towns has been uploaded yet, but all towns had to have their erosion inventories completed last year. So that data will be filtering through here, and we'll be working with municipalities to address those. If you've seen all the road ditching work that's happening in many towns, this is where that's coming from. So we'll be working to keep that going and to make those improvements on municipal roads. The state also has those same regulations, so all state roads are going through the same process. We deal with wastewater treatment facilities as well. There are 5 in the basin, 4 municipal, one industrial, and we are looking at reducing nitrogen from those wastewater discharges as well. And then we have the natural resource, which is certainly my favorite part of it. Fixing those natural resource issues that we can, and removing dams is usually at the top of the list. I was mentioning in here earlier that we're going to be doing what's called a river corridor plan or stream geomorphic assessment of the upper West River to try to determine where the sediment is coming from that's ending up in Townsend Lake, and try to find projects to help address that. Basically the sediment and erosion issues, promoting and trying to expand riparian buffers throughout the basin. It's a problem kind of all over, small and large scales. The map that you're looking at here are the geomorphic conditions, and again, the red is the not good scale, and there's no green on it, except like one tiny one down by Crosby Brook. So moving those rivers by doing restoration and habitat work towards the yellow and the green end of the scale is what we're looking to do. Our lake shores, we have a program called LakeWise, which is an outreach and education and technical assistance for lakeshore owners to implement best management practices on lake shores, which include things like buffers and cutting down on impervious surfaces. So we've got that's going to be a focus here. Stratton Pond, if you're familiar with that, is showing some water quality degradation. It's increasing phosphorus levels. So we're concerned about that, and we'll be trying to look at that and determine why that's happening, where that is coming from, so we can stem that. There's something called greeter programs to assist lakes with controlling or reducing the spread of invasive species, where someone is there at the boat launch, able to look at boats, assess them, see if there's any invasive plants on them, and inform lake users about invasive plants. So we'd like to expand that. We have a lay monitoring program where volunteers go out and collect water samples and take readings of the lakes on a regular basis. And there are some lakes that don't have monitors yet that we would like to try to find that and institute that program on these particular lakes and any others where volunteers might be amenable to taking that on. And we do have some data gaps where we have insufficient data to really be able to determine what's really happening in a lake. So we internally will be looking at how we get that data in. Wetland restoration is also a to-do, assessing those wetlands that I discussed earlier for class 1 and making sure that our wetlands are well mapped. We can't protect something that we don't know is there. So there is work that needs to be done to get the wetlands on our maps. Wetland recommendations for restoration, Herrick's Cove and Retreat Meadows, certainly. Something called Henwood Hill Marsh in Westminster and the Sand Hill Road Wetland in Putney have all been brought forward as potential restoration projects. And again, those ag fields up in Weston, a lot of those are converted wetlands. So is there a way to do some restoration in that area? The fisheries folks do this piece of the basin plan and look at the fisheries. So the blue lines are wild brook trout, and the blues and the greens and the yellows are all fish habitat or fisheries, young or adult fish, depending on how you're looking at it. And their concerns are similar to the others, restoring riparian corridors and aquatic habitat connectivity, whether that's a dam removal or a culvert that fish can't move through, working on that flood resiliency so the rivers are in equilibrium and not washing out and not being dredged and bermed as floods happen, reducing the spread of exotic species and pathogens, and basically protecting the water quality to ensure that the fishery remains in good shape. We also look at the forest, that very important landscape feature. We have programs with the Department of Forest Parks and Recreation for skidder bridges, which are ways for loggers to cross streams without having water quality impact, looking at stream erosion and resiliency work on logging roads and stream crossings and those kind of things. And protecting forest habitat and making sure that forests remain as forest for water quality protection. And the endangered species and the climate change adaptation piece of this certainly overlap. We have a number of what's called species of greatest conservation need in this area. And part of it is that the lower Connecticut River is the northern end of a lot of southern species range. And with climate change and migration, the lower Connecticut River Valley is kind of modeled, I will use that word, to be a very important migration route for southern species to make their way north into the cooler areas. So this kind of protection and looking at these connections that the Connecticut River and the tributaries offer is part of what we're kind of starting to look at and try to work on. So this is what the table of strategies looks like. And I culled this just to some major headings so you could see what is in the plan and how it looks. So there's, you know, the focus area where we want to do something and what it is we want to do. So the table in this plan has over 90 of these. And these are the kind of the highlights. And there are hundreds that are in the Watershed Projects database, which is the live list of projects that we have, which we are always adding to and hopefully ticking off as we complete them. So, and it's broken down by those land use areas. So we do this every 5 years. The last plan was done in 2005, and we have made progress. Over 75% of the strategies in that plan have been undertaken in some way. They're either completed or underway, or they're ongoing projects like outreach. Just some examples. This was a channel restoration we did in Dover, in Newfane, just south of Dover. And a dam removal in the village of Weston. These are the types of projects that we do going forward. And so I feel like 75% of, I think 160 projects wasn't too bad in 5 years. If you're interested in the projects, there's something called the Clean Water Project Explorer. And if you just Google that, VT Clean Water Project Explorer, and put in your town name, all these little dots will come up. And each one is a project that has been identified that still needs to be done. And if you click on the dot, it will bring up what that project is. And we have all these projects identified. What we need is landowners, municipalities, partners to say they are willing to work with us to implement those projects, because these are on somebody's land and we can't do them without cooperation. And we're always looking for willing participants to implement these projects. So this is the public input process. We have done the monitoring, we've done the assessment work, we've drafted the plan. So I'm looking for your input on, did I get it right? What have I missed? And if there are other concerns, if you have project ideas, where you know something needs to be done, where you notice there is a water quality problem, I will take all the comments and put them in what's called a responsiveness summary. Comment period runs through September 3rd. You can email me is the easiest way to do it. You can, if you can't get a hold of me, you can send it to Corey or to the Regional Planning Commission, and they will forward your comments to me if you know them better. But I will take all comments and review them and answer them, excuse me, and put them in the responsiveness summary. I will make plan edits based on those. And then that whole document will become an appendix so you can see how your comment was addressed.
There is a question in the chat.
Yep.
The draft basin plan exhibits an obvious hostility towards whitewater boating on the West River. The 2015 basin plan rated the West River as, quote, highly important for boating. Nationally known whitewater releases national team trial site. Put in USECE Ball Mountain Dam, take out USECE Townsend Dam. Yet the draft plan excludes whitewater boating as an existing use in the table. Please explain whether the draft plan considers whitewater boating to be an existing use on the West River, and explain why it has been eliminated on the existing use table in the draft basin plan.
I don't believe it has been eliminated. I certainly would not do that, and if somehow that happened, it does not. Whitewater boating is a very important use on the West River, and boating period is a very important recreational use. The concern that is expressed in the basin plan is due to the impact of the whitewater releases, which the Department of Fisheries has monitored over the years, and their concern is that as the water level flushes through when the gates are open, it inundates communities and washes things away. The larger concern is that when the gates are closed, the water just kind of shuts off rather than ramping up and ramping down more slowly so that the critters on the edge can move and get in. What they have found is that those pools that are left by that quick drawdown is stranding fish and other aquatic organisms. So that's where that concern is coming from. I will bring the fisheries biologist into and to look at all the comments that come in regarding that. And there's no intent to reduce the importance of whitewater and in all boating on any of these rivers. So I will look at that to make sure that that existing use is documented, and I boat the West River as well. So I will look at that. Thank you. If that's an error, if that is in there.
There's a lengthy response. Do you want it?
Sure.
Okay. Many people in the whitewater community only became aware of this meeting to discuss the plan for the West River in the last few days. So please consider my comments representative of dozens, perhaps hundreds of paddlers, and if you include commercial rafters, thousands of paddlers. I have been a whitewater enthusiast for several decades, who has enjoyed the West River releases countless times, and their absence would be a great loss to me and other whitewater enthusiasts. The report has minimal mention of recreational releases, and those mentions are all negative. The basis for the negative statements comes from bias, not substantiated facts. The comment about the illegality of recreation releases on page 228 is a misreading of the law. If this misreading is applied to the ACOE shutting off water after flood control releases, then those operations will be illegal too. And on the subject of flood control releases, these happen with equal suddenness.
Thank you for that. As I said, I will address all the comments, and I have already received whitewater comments from others. So I understand that it is a large concern, and I will address that. Thank you.
And we had another comment that just says, I just want to be sure we're looking at supporting recreational use of the rivers. This includes swimming, boating, fishing, and habitat. Absolutely.
And it looks like I'm going to have to enhance the recreational piece of this. And I'm glad to do that. Any comments from within the room?
Over the last couple of days after the last heavy rains, I've seen some of the town ditches that have accumulated a lot of sediment, which tells me they're doing what they're supposed to do. But is there any clean out, or will it continue to collect sediment and then start going back into the streets?
The concept and the reason for the road ditching, stone line road ditch is as you say, is to trap that sediment. Just as any road ditch needs maintenance, these also do that. They tend to last longer, collect more sediment, but they do require cleaning out. And it's more of an effort, certainly, to clean out a rock line ditch than it is to just go scoop a bunch of stuff out. But it is retaining that sediment, which is the goal. So yes, those do require maintenance, and after storms like this, hopefully towns will be able to manage that and get out and clean, particularly the sediment basins, which are often at the end of those.
So the maintenance is taking the stone out, removing the sediment, putting the stone back in?
Basically a large stream.
No. Yeah. But hopefully it doesn't have to happen. These storms are certainly a challenge.
Can I just one thing?
Please.
Just anecdotally, what we've heard at Wetland Regional from some road foreman, road crew members is that it seems like this helps, and this was truly an extraordinary July. And for a lot of towns, the events of July 29th was the biggest event since Irene. And some places maybe even a little bigger. Some places less, how it can be spotty, but that the stone helps take it helps reduce the sediment loading by actually taking some of the energy out of the water. But another thing I just add, one of the things I hope we can do as a regional commission, maybe in collaboration with the conservation district, I'm not exactly sure what approach we can take, and of course DEC and others, is just working also with more private landholders about maintaining vegetated buffers along their stretches of rivers and streams. Because one of the things I think you'll also see is where buffers have been mown down, like right to the stream edge. If you drive around now, you can see it. What areas held and what didn't. And, you know, it's not just a water quality issue. Frankly, it can be a property issue. It can save your house. It can save your distribution field. It can save, you know, whatever else you might have. And so I hope we just do more outreach and education to average homeowners. It's hard to do in this context because we don't really, and maybe it's working with master gardeners, you know, things like extension service and other things have changed. Conservation district does a great job, but of course they've also got limited time to do a lot of great work with agriculture and others. But if there's something that we can do collectively to do just more, and maybe it's more just neighbor outreach about, you know, what is a buffer? Why do you maintain it? What, you know, what's in it for them to do it? You know, because the views are nice, you know, having that park-like setting is nice, but you can also lose your land if you don't do it right. And it's just an important lesson to be learned.
That's certainly be added. Thank you.
And driveway culverts are a whole other topic.
That's for sure. Thank you.
Another comment in the comment box. Our three-generation family rafting business, Crab Apple Whitewater, has rafted and kayaked on the West River since 1991. Approximately 12,000 rafters have joined us in that time. These users fill local lodging and food establishments each spring and fall. Boating is clearly a critical component of the West River Basin. We enjoy the river with hundreds, if not thousands, of whitewater enthusiasts. It is disheartening to read this basin plan, which seems so obviously tilted negatively towards whitewater boating and its community that have enjoyed scheduled whitewater releases below Walnut again since the 1970s.
Thank you for that. I don't think I have another slide. I just want to check.
And then a follow-up question, does the report address the economic impact of outdoor recreation, and is there a coordination with the OREC? That is, for example, a two-day whitewater release generates $440,000 in economic activity according to the study of whitewater releases on West River. How does the plan address these positive impacts?
I will go back and look at the recreational piece. That recreation is outdoor recreation is a big focus of our governor and of the Agency of Natural Resources, and promoting that and particularly making it accessible to all populations. So I will relook at that and make sure that I address those issues.
And then another question, the social equity portion of the plan identifies themes and focus areas for underserved communities and serving those communities through the implementation of this plan. Can you comment on how impacted communities have been involved in the development of this plan or will be involved in helping co-manage or co-create implementation?
This is the first plan to address the equity piece. So it is a beginning, and I have worked with not an extensive array of folks, but certainly within the agency and some river users that are concerned about this issue as well. And that's where those strategies have come from. I am very open to hearing others and bringing more people into that conversation. It has so far been somewhat limited, and we're trying, the agency is trying to address this issue on a larger scale. So I am very welcoming to all input on this section and how to better address issues of concern and involve communities in a stronger way. So I welcome any input you would have to offer.
And then they replied, thank you for your attention to it and for your response.
Speaking about economic impact, years ago I was in Hancock, New York, and read a short article in the local newspaper about how much fishermen contributed to the local community. The West River at one time was a decent fishery. It's no longer a decent trout fishery because you need that depth to maintain the cool water temperatures. So if the Corps of Engineers would pay attention to the depth, you might elicit more fishermen coming up and spending money locally. Again, the depth is a really big deal, and I'm not sure that you're ever going to get it to be the same depth as the Cannonball Reservoir, but you know, that makes a big difference.
Yeah, for sure. Some of the restoration work that we're looking at, as Chris was mentioning, the buffers are really important for that shading to keep the water cool and to keep those banks in place. Certainly, Irene widened the rivers to a great extent, which benefits some species that we don't necessarily think about, like that cobblestone tiger beetle, which now has cobble, but it's not so good for the fish. So we are building up the berms on the side of brooks as they get dredged out also causes problems for the fishery because water can now build up to a higher level in the brook, which means it's moving faster and has more energy, and it rips out that stream bed and it carries away fish spawn and eggs and things like that. So all those projects, river restoration projects that we would like to be doing as those get implemented should help the fisheries as they go forward. And we work very closely with the fisheries biologists to make those happen. So, thank you. If anyone, please contact me through marie.caduto@vermont.gov, which is on the screen. And as I said, through Corey or the Regional Planning Commission office, and they will get me your comments. I look forward to going through them and addressing them on an individual comment basis. And the deadline for that comment period is September 3rd. If there are no more questions, thank you for joining tonight. I appreciate your input. All right, then we will close the meeting. Have a good night.
Thank you, Marie. Good show.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good night.
Someone mentioned the website says the comment period closes August 27th.
Yes, the comment period does close September 3rd. This meeting was delayed, so I extended the comment period, and I will make that correction on the website. Thank you.
Thank you.
To close the meeting.